Hello and welcome to the Stories of Northern Life, a podcast brought to you by the Sault Ste. Marie Museum, sharing the heritage of Northern Ontario and the culturally rich stories in everyday life. We bring the events and people of the Sioux's past to a new light and capture the stories of changemakers in our northern community today. By now, everyone in the Sioux has heard about the jaw-dropping news of the YMCA closing its doors. The 125-year-old charitable and recreational institution will be listing its building for sale and ceasing all of its programming by the end of May 2024. This news has rippled feelings of nostalgia along with grief as we lose what was once a pillar in our community, a part of many, many generations over the years. With this short episode, I hope to shed a light on the history, and maybe we can join in together and share the memories of the YMCA in Sault Ste. Marie. Let's start with the history of the organization itself. I sure don't think any of you were around to remember this, but we're going to start at the beginning anyway. The YMCA is an abbreviation for the Young Men's Christian Association, FYI. The first Canadian YMCA opened its doors in 1851, but it was not until December 17th of 1990 that the very first locally organized meeting of the Young Men's Christian Association was held at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church on Wellington Street East. It was chaired by Reverend W.A. Duncan, and A.W. Rossborough was the secretary, both pro tem. The provincial secretary of the YMCA was also present at this meeting, and altogether they elected the rest of the team of officers. The first regular monthly meeting was held at the very start of the new year in 1901 at St. Luke's. And the very first board meeting was held at the end of that same month in the rented YMCA facilities. The YMCA planned to do aggressive work amongst the men and boys who worked in the local industries, all with the intent to aid the spiritual, intellectual, physical, and social needs of men and boys. Well, we don't have the entire picture like always, but I will tell you what we do know. On New Year's Day in 1901, a public meeting was held and the first fundraising began. They generated $85 to equip boarding rooms in a building on the south side of Queen Street near Spring Street. Fundraising must have gone well, as in February of that same year, John Wilson of Belleville was appointed the first general secretary at a salary of $850. The Y was soon incorporated. Woohoo! By April 1903, the first shower baths were installed, and by June, the dormitory rooms were ready to be rented. They were rented at $6 a month for one person and $8 per month for two. Anyone wishing to join the association had to make an application to the board through one of the existing members. As the title YMCA suggests, only young men were allowed to board here. And I believe that was always true throughout the Y's time offering boarding in the Sioux. In 1904, there was a total of 13 members in the junior boys class. One report stated that the girls were actually given access to the facility for the first time in September 1906. This probably was a class, like the junior boys, that got temporary access. Things continued to look good, and K.C. Kenson was later appointed as the first physical director with a salary of $600, and his duties commencing on July 1st, 1907. His job title suggests that he took care of the operations and maintenance of the facilities, as well as the individuals themselves. Locally, the YMCA had grown to 84 members in 1908. So the idea for the Y to have its own building rather than renting was at the forefront. A building committee was soon appointed on October 5th, 1910, to search for the best place to move on its own. In 1911, the association purchased 2 pieces of property on March Street, where the Sioux Center, that white office building on March Street, is located today. A first mortgage of $30,000 was needed to complete the building, while a second mortgage of $15,000 was required to furnish it. The following year, in 1912, a campaign was launched to raise the $50,000 needed for the construction of the new building on March Street, which began in May of that year by McPhail and Wright Construction Company. 2 years later, in 1914, the newly built YMCA was opened, which included the amenities of a swimming pool, gymnasium, meeting rooms, and later an outdoor tennis court. Unfortunately, women were excluded from the facilities. That was until November of the year of opening, 1914, when they gained limited access. They had to wait another year to be allowed full access of the facilities. In YMCA history, there are YWCAs, though there are no records in at least our collection of a YWCA here in the Sioux. Many may fondly remember Saturday night dances at the YMCA, or maybe even the annual circuses that the YMCA would throw. Whether you were getting your Red Cross certifications or just learning the basics of how to swim, the Y was a great place to learn anything amongst your peers. Many other classes and instruction was offered, like ballet, wrestling, basketball, and so much more. I have noted that at a time, the boys' director was Gus Cullikins, and the girls' and ladies' director was Margie Bernzines. Tupper Tomes was the boxing coach, and Dwayne Buchanan was the lifeguard and swimming instructor. Many of you would recognize Russ Ramsey as a long-standing basketball manager for the YMCA as well. I would love to open up the conversation here to any listeners with stories of your time at the YMCA throughout the years. You can write us an email, send us a voice note, or message us on Facebook or Instagram, or better yet, we can schedule a time to sit down and record your story like the ones you hear on the Stories of Northern Life podcast. All the details on how to contact us will be in the show notes, as well as found on our website, Sioux Museum, that's SAULT museum.ca. We know that in 1920, due to financial difficulties, the March Street building was leased to the Algoma Steel Corporation and became known as the Steel Plant Club for the next 3 years. Yet, in 1924, 3 years later, a piece of property was purchased at Island Lake for a day and overnight camping, and it was known as Camp Powhatan. This location later became Algoma Music Camp in 1964. If any of you remember that. I'd love to hear stories of what the Y was like in both of these settings. But as we move on our timeline, the Sioux was growing. And by the 1960s, the need for a new Y space became apparent. There was much debate on the location chosen, the location we know today. Many were concerned whether it'd be a good fit for our city. The concerns were around the decrease in property value of the nearby homes due to increased traffic. The increased traffic would be unsafe for kids. The location should be where other establishments are, not residences. and so on and so on. The pros were that it was close to residential areas, and kids would be able to walk to the Y. The location was expected to be a booming area of town, and the bus routes were already established there. The property they were having concerns over was called Penhorwood Park. Penhorwood was a prominent figure in our local history, and fun fact, we have his medals in our military gallery, if you ever want to come and check those out. But in the end, it all came down to this location, and it is the location we know today on McNabb Street. And it was purchased from the city for $35,000 in 1963. Construction began the following year, and the new location opened its doors in September of 1965. A large number of additions and renovations to this Y building occurred over the years. In 1973, squash courts were added. In 1980, the indoor track was added. In 1991, the William M. Hogg Family Center was built. And in 2010, the facility was upgraded utilizing the Recreation Infrastructure Canada funding program. The YMCA continued to be a popular facility for all ages in our community. And unfortunately, over time with aging facilities and the added pressure of COVID, things shifted to our current situation. I hope this episode sparks conversation and remembering of the good old days at the YMCA. Now I hope the YMCA song plays in your mind as you go on with the rest of your day, and you think of stories you want to share with us here at the Sioux Museum and the Stories of Northern Life podcast. Well, that's it for me. Ciao for now, and I'll talk to you again next week for another episode of the Stories of Northern Life.
Hi, I'm JL Fizzell, and I write and publish poetry inspired by nature and the art of being human. These are some of my words. The poem I'm about to read for you is from my third book, North of Dreams, and it's about finding the light in the darkness. It's called Bittersweet Sun. Sunsets are enchanting and bittersweet because you know what you're losing. You bid your goodbyes to the brightness while darkness waits on the other side, along with all its mysteries that hide there. But nonetheless, we are ever thankful for the magic of stars in the morning of the moon while the sun hides away, so that others might shine for a bit. A million faraway suns reminding you that there is always light, even when yours disappears. I hope this poem took you somewhere inside yourself that you needed to go. You can listen to my story here on the Stories of Northern Life podcast. Links are in the show notes.
Have you been to your local museum lately? Visit us at the Sault Ste. Marie Museum, located in downtown Sault Ste. Marie, the one with the big clock tower on the top. Our hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday to Saturday. We have 3 floors of exhibits that we constantly work on updating. The whole family is welcome, as we have activity sheets and scavenger hunts with prizes for every kiddo, a discovery gallery full of hands-on learning, and more interactive elements scattered throughout the museum. And don't forget to come say hi and let us know you're a listener of the podcast.